mixed, uncomfortable, restrained, don't belong, isolated, misunderstood, outsider, other, uncomfortable, different, alone, restrained, mixed, don't belong, isolated, excluded, misunderstood, half, outsider, constrained, conflicted, other, different, overwhelmed, alone, questioned, mixed, apart, confined, excluded, detached, half and half, single, constrained. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. Apart, I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be overwhelmed, Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. Conflicted, overwhelmed, questioned, constrained, conflicted, overwhelmed, uncomfortable, questioned, restrained, overwhelmed, don't belong, questioned, isolated, apart, misunderstood, confined, detached, outsider, single, uncomfortable, don't belong, isolated, misunderstood, outsider, other, conflicted, different, overwhelmed, alone, questioned, mixed, apart, excluded, detached, half and half, constrained, uncomfortable, conflicted, restrained, overwhelmed, don't belong, questioned, isolated, apart, misunderstood, confined, outsider, detached, single, other, different, unaccompanied, alone, lonely, mixed, excluded. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. Conflicted. Different. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white, which makes me feel like I don't belong. I know both sides of my family love me, and I love them too, but it's hard to be both. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. Alone. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white. I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, or white enough to be white, which makes me feel like I don't belong. I know both sides of my family love me, and I love them too, but it's hard to be both.
Dear Diary, my thoughts bleed onto this paper as if you'll answer me. Each day, as I conclude an entry, my signature is left with two identities. But of which nationality am I more?
More Somali. I consider myself more Somali.
My mind flips back and forth, Somali, American, too Americanized, but not Somali enough. Look at me.
Only because I was born there, and because I did live there for a short period of time when I was very young, I think for like 2 to 3 years, I do have a little bit more family connections than like my younger sisters and brothers have, because they had no experience whatsoever. So I remember my aunts and uncles and a lot of people back home that they don't know who remember me and know me. And also we moved to Canada when I was three and a half, and so we learned French, and there were a lot of Somali people there, so I feel like that shaped my identity more, the fact that I grew up around a community with Somali people there as opposed to Amherst, Massachusetts, which has like no Somali people at all.
When people ask you where you're from, what do you tell them?
I would say that I would Amherst.
waan u malaynayaa inaan Maraykanad noqdo iminka.
So I would consider myself more Somali. Plus, I learned the cooking techniques and everyone from my mom because I was the oldest kid. So I know a lot about the culture.
What do you know about being Somali?
I know that Somali people speak a different kind of languages.
Marka laga eego waxyaalaha sidaan u labisto iyo saan dadka ula hadlo iyo waxyaaladay ku hadlaan aanan jeclayn, waan u malaynayaa inaan in yar noqdo.
What's the difference between Somali culture and American culture?
Dhaqanka Soomaalidu waxa weeyaan in Soomaalidu dhaqankoodu way isku wada xiran yihiin oo familieska oo kale waxay familiesku isku wada xiran yihiin haduuna mid ugu waxaysan ka kale siiyaan sidan Maraykanku ay jecel yihiin inay qof u dhaqmaan oo qof kasta aniga oo yiraahdo Soomaalidu waxa weeyaan annaga.
Though you've lived here for 20 years, do you truly feel American?
Maya.
What do you see? In my eyes, my mind, my soul? No flag truly depicts me. No flag can determine what I can be, who I will be.
Showing your pride, I think, isn't necessarily wearing like a sweatshirt with Somali around it every day, or the hat, or the armband, or whatever else. You don't have to be over dramatic about it, or be over the top, or have it be in blatant view at all points in time for other people to know where you come from. It's more in how you think, how you behave, how you act, how you see other people, and the fact that that's just your identity. So that's just what you are regardless. You don't necessarily need to put it out there 24/7 just so the world can know. If people want to know about you, then that's on them, but if they don't, then that's okay also.
My pride is this heartbeat, this mind, this breath, me, just me, not endorsing my nationality, whichever it may be. I am Deqa Mohammed Farah. Deqa Mohammed Farah. Sincerely, Deqa.